Can I sit in this chair with a gun? I can. It's close. All right. What's up, FTFers? Today I got my good friend Mike Simmons with me. And Mike, I really appreciate it every time you come on because you are so smart.
Good to hang out with you, man.
I really enjoy our conversations, and I really felt like I have a topic today that me and you have talked about before in the past, and I think the audience would appreciate it.
Okay, what you got on your mind, brother?
Today I want to discuss adequacy.
Okay.
As far as gear and as training goes as well.
For sure.
So related to your skill sets as well. And to get it started, I'll go ahead and give you a good example so the audience has something to to think about, mull over. So let's talk about a poncho first.
You had to pick that one.
Yeah, because it's the one that everybody knows. Right? It's probably the most commonly picked item for somebody in survival
everywhere,
right, to have in their pack, and they justify it because it's a multi-tool. It's a tried and true proven platform,
available everywhere,
right? But is it adequate for a guy that is 5'10"? Maybe, right?
That's a good thing.
What about a guy who is 6'2"?
Right.
Because a standard military poncho, I mean, believe me, I've done it. I don't fit under one. Right, and this is a subject that you and I have discussed multiple times.
At great length.
At great lengths, right? Yes. So I want to kind of continue that so they can kind of get, a fly on the wall type of view of what our viewpoint is on that.
I'm just going to let it out.
Okay, so I'm going to let you go here in a second because I know you have a lot to say about the subject. But what we have come to the conclusion, being our height and how much we weigh, our size, all of these factors, that we also include a tarp of some sort into our kit. And we reason that because it's different if you're just going on a day hike, something like we're doing today where we're out in the wilderness, but we're coming home, right? We're not that far away from our vehicles. I could see having a lightweight kit with just a poncho in it for something like we're doing today.
Right.
But I think the application where people talk about this is in relation to go bags, inch bags, get out of dodge bags, bug out bags, all of these different kits that are out there, and they are literally relying on that to be their main shelter element, other than their clothing, or even potentially adding something to the equation like fire to help maintain their core body temperature.
Well, when you start compromising on adequacy, the more it's going to require out of us. So if you're only going to run a very basic kit, like you're going to run a poncho, there's going to be things that you're going to have to do. And so the way I gauge adequacy is how much does that kit stand alone by itself and how much does it require out of me? Because I'm not necessarily guaranteed to be able to function. If I'm injured, exhausted,
very good point.
Anything, and so there comes a point of diminishing returns to where I'm no longer able to function, and because my gear was inadequate, like all of the gear that's issued to the military, none of it is adequate, right? It requires something on the part of the soldier or the Marine to make that gear function, to make up the difference. And so the lack in adequacy, the soldier has to make up that difference. And the poncho has always been that way. So the poncho was never adequate at rain gear or shelter. Okay, it was just something that was issued to the soldier, and then they in turn made that gear function in the field.
Improvised for things like ranger roles, covering up fire supplies, or protecting their weapon systems.
And you can make that work as long as you go into it with the mindset. The problem I see with a lot of people is that they're relying on that gear, and they don't have the understanding of what's going to be required of them to make that piece of gear sufficient. So with the poncho, the best you're going to get out of it is being able to curl up in a fetal position under it, something like that.
Right. You're not pulling in a bunch of fire-making materials in there with you and processing stuff while you're sheltering from the elements. I mean, what if a literal turd floater came and...
frog strangler.
Yeah, right, comes down. You're not going to be doing all of these things, which we have demonstrated in many videos. I always show you have to remove yourself from the condition that's causing the problem.
Yeah.
First of all, right? You're exposed to the elements. It is pouring rain. You are getting soaking wet. You need a place so that you can basically recover, and then you can implement whatever the next phase of the plan is, which is trying to get a fire started, right?
It's to get you the opportunity to where you have a buffer from the elements to where you're not being bombarded by this. And if all you need is a sunshade, a poncho, if it's fair weather,
Excellent.
you know, you can set up a sunshade. Maybe you just simply need a little bit of concealment, right?
Like when I go hunting, I do
You go
that.
hunting, you know, you set
Yeah.
up your poncho, it keeps the wind off the back of your neck, you know, and stuff like that. So it does have application. The problem is it's not a standalone piece of gear. So we've talked about before, like if you're going to carry, a tarp in the wintertime, or if you're going to carry a poncho, it has to be paired with a bivy.
Right.
So that you get this multi-layer buffer
Right.
from the elements and everything.
Yeah, and not to mention like whatever your intermediate layers are, whatever you're using.
That's true.
For, you know, it could be lack of clothing
Yeah.
that could cause the problem. So like you were saying, you know, the less that you carry, the more is going to be required out of you. There's going to be more work to do when you're in the field.
Yep, and I know sometimes the greatest thing that you can give yourself is time, right?
Yeah.
And so that's everything in my kit that I carry. First and foremost, its primary function is to buy me time in some form or fashion, right?
Right.
And so I carry that so that I've got time to sit down and formulate a plan. I've got the time to get out of the elements and then be able to self-assess.
You've managed
Pop
a
a blister.
crisis.
Right.
Right.
You know, the life threat is over.
Yep.
Now I've got to figure out what the next phase is, right?
Yeah. So is that poncho adequate for that job? And that's just one of many. I have other examples as well, because we're survival instructors. People come to our school, they receive training,
Yeah.
and we have a list for them,
Yep.
right? We don't really designate in the list. We do give examples, but like when we say a tarp, we will say, i.e., 3 meter by 3 meter DD tarp as an example, not saying that's what they have to carry. Or if they choose to do the rectangular tarp, you know, we usually say 9 by 12, 8 by 10. We give them specific examples, but we often see people show up with, like when they read poncho on, you know, military style poncho.
So they show up with one of those emergency clear ponchos
right, from Walmart
from
or
Walmart
something.
that was, you know, 99 cents at, you know, whatever.
And that is certainly 100% not adequate enough.
Right.
Because it's a one-use item, a lot like the survival blankets that come in medical kits.
I tried it. You know, when they first started doing that, they promoted this thing, this grabber space blanket and everything, setting up the lean-to shelter and all of that. And I'm just thinking, you guys are in for a bad night.
Right, because there's a lot of them out there that are not adequate.
Well, you've got to stay up all night keeping the fire going. You get a cat nap for maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then you're back up tending the fire because you have to have that external heat source.
Yep.
Because you're open all the way around. Now, we started talking about the 3x3 tarp as being the minimum of adequacy because of all the different configurations. You could adjust to the conditions if you needed to do a Forester's, if you needed to do an A-frame, if you needed to do a diamond, whatever.
Lean-to, plow point, whatever.
All of that. You can do, if you want to do a lean-to with a 3x3, you can do a double layer lean-to.
Yep.
So that you actually get what's called shade instead of shadow.
Correct.
You know, and that makes a huge difference in the summertime, being able to have 2 layers for that UV to pass through before it gets to you to be able to cool down.
I can't remember what it's actually called in the industry, you know, where you use a portion of your tarp as your ground bivy, basically is the foreprint, and then you use the rest of it for your wind protection or for your shade or, you know, shelter from the rain, whatever, snow, whatever it is.
Yeah, and being able to get out of the elements. So human beings are the only creatures on this planet that cannot survive in their natural environment without clothing and tools.
You mean I can't survive on the couch eating Cheetos?
You know what I mean? So we got started talking about all of this adequacy and everything, and I think it really originated with, so we always build redundancy into our kit.
Hyper redundancy.
Hyper redundancy, right? And so, and then we got to thinking, you know, well, we need to do that with adequacy as well. Build in extra layers, a buffer of adequacy, because you know, and I know you're out there, you think you've packed your kit, you're going out for 2 days, right?
Okay.
And so you've packed your kit of what you believe the weather conditions are going to be. right? And things change on a dime. And so that kit that you had that was determined to be adequate given the parameters that you had, all of a sudden
Doesn't work.
doesn't work. And so if I have a buffer of adequacy built in to where, you know, I've got extra layers I can put on or whatever, then it allows me to not be the determining factor of whether that event is successful or not.
I mean, this is why we always encourage people to plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Yep.
Right? Better
Yeah,
to
today
have
it's 60 degrees.
Well, it was 23 degrees this morning.
This morning it was 23.
When we woke up, it was 23 degrees.
Yeah.
Ice and frost everywhere. And now it's 60 degrees,
Yep.
which is crazy. But I think that's, you know, the very nature of an emergency in the first place, right?
That's true. It's when what you had planned goes awry,
It fails.
You know,
Your gear fails, you fail, whatever the circumstance is. But
what do we say? Like gear fails, conditions change, and situations devolve.
Devolve. Yes, write that down.
Write that down.
That's a very good one. Yes, you heard it here first. Several videos ago.
Several, yeah.
When we were discussing myths of survival versus fallacies in survival. So yeah, write that one down.
So I want you guys to know that we've done the brain work as well as the field work.
For years,
right? We
and
spend
years and years.
365. We eat, live, and breathe this stuff.
Not to mention, not just ourselves, but being able to be around all of the other instructors that are in our circle, right? Going to other schools and training with other schools and instructors, and then also all of the students that we see. So we have a really good, right?
Well,
I mean, we have seen every
tribe.
product. We have seen, you know, what works, what doesn't work. We have seen name brand stuff fail.
Yeah.
You know,
we gave it its just due. Like, so when we started with all of this and everything, there was a lot of things that were contrary to the way we were raised and what we were taught growing up and stuff. And so we gave
Let's try it.
Several years. We spent the time going out. We're testing this thing. Okay, does this work? And I mean, you know, going into it, what's going to happen.
Which is adequacy in the experience as well.
Right.
Which I feel like we have adequately given that a shot.
Absolutely.
Whatever it is.
And so if we tell you that we've tried something, you can take it to the bank.
That's right.
We've researched it, and
not to say that whatever we say is word either, because we're always telling people, don't believe us. Go do your own research.
Right.
Go find out for yourself what works for you, what works for me, what works for you. It might be different.
Well, and we're trying to stay open, and so open to new ideas. And so just because we don't know something doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad. And we're open to being told that and shown different things and new things. And so we try to give it its just due and take it. What my grandfather used to call, we'll chew on it.
Yeah.
You know, like a cow chews its cud and
Exactly.
brings it back up. And so we'll table the idea for a while, and we'll wait and see if any new information comes up or whatever. But
Definitely.
Adequacy, most of the time, the stuff that you see on TV, the gear that was adequate for that individual that was a professional survivalist, that gear was adequate for that individual.
For his level of experience.
His level of experience.
His level
and
of training.
Right. And the calculations had already been done and things like that. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be adequate for somebody else.
Right.
You know, somebody that, you know, doesn't have your physical abilities.
Right. Yeah. Maybe they're, yeah.
So it's just determining what's going to be adequate for you is kind of a tricky thing.
Yeah, because that is going to determine what you carry. Number one, your level of training should be inversely proportionate to your skill level as well. So that's why we're saying what you carry might be different from us, because you're not trained in whatever it is.
Right.
You know, maybe if you've never used a ferro rod, maybe you shouldn't rely on that as your sole use of starting a fire.
Right.
Right.
Well, and I'm going to have to carry more food because I'm not a professional forager. I don't know what I can.
You're not a hunter. You're not a fisherman. You're not a whatever.
Something like that. And so my kit being adequate, like I'm going to need more calories because I'm not going to be able to harvest off the land or something.
Now, here's a good one. I got a good question for you. Something that I thought of before we actually did this. So, you know, a lot of people who don't have the same experiences and I would say exposure to what we have, because we get to see a lot of really cool stuff. What's up and coming too, we get to be involved in prototype testing with a lot of companies, etc. But we see a lot of people and they watch videos and they go to these schools and they start writing out a list, right? And most of them start out with something like the 10 C's of survivability,
Right.
right? And this is what is driving them to purchase what they need, because unfortunately a lot of people look at that gear like it's an insurance policy. Something goes wrong.
They tie up all of their hopes in that thing.
On the gear itself.
Right. And
right.
that is derived from, the appeal to authority, because this person that promoted that gear was perceived to be an expert on the subject.
Exactly. So they follow monkey, right?
Right.
They follow suit. But they have this list of things, and they say, I don't know, they find their favorite contestant on Alone, their favorite content creator, their favorite whatever,
Right.
and they say, well, this guy runs this knife, he runs this sleeping bag, he runs this whatever, but there's things behind the scenes that they don't know, like maybe a big one I see is like down jackets, for example.
Right.
Okay, down here in the South, that would kill us. If the down gets wet,
Yep.
it loses all of its insulative
absorbing
properties.
moisture out of the air and stuff.
However,
like that.
if we were in a dry climate,
right,
and we were at elevation or whatever, then a down jacket would be amazing.
Yes.
Right. So there's all these like little things that they have to know first of all before they choose the gear, and then so they've written the list out. Right. Now they start ordering from Amazon, from REI, from whatever place they get their stuff from or whatever. Is the stuff on the list that they're trying to buy within their budget? Number
That's
one.
a constraining factor.
And so in order to complete the list, do you sacrifice on a piece of kit just so that you can check the box?
Yeah.
Right? What's your thoughts on that? I mean, I know what we tell people at school, but
the thing of it is, there's really no compromise. You have to. We all have budgetary constraints.
right.
And there are substitutions that you can do. Just realize that the more you substitute, the more constraints you're going to have on the capability of that item. Not to say that a really expensive item will be able to do everything and anything. They all have limitations. But for instance, I'm a proponent of Mora knives. I really like Mora knives.
And they're very inexpensive.
But I understand that they have limitations.
Right.
I can't baton a companion, right? So.
But it's got a 3/4 tang, Mike.
Right. It's just not going to hold up the longevity of it and things like that.
Right, and that's that buffer of adequacy you're talking
Right.
about because we have seen Mora knives break in the field many times.
And so that's when we partnered up with WC Knives, and he'd reached out to us about making a knife and everything. That knife has a buffer. It will cover anything I ever need to do with a knife.
With our skill level.
Right.
Put it that way.
Right.
I can watch, and I even can think of friends in our circle that could absolutely destroy one.
Oh yeah, I mean you can break the ears off of anvil. I mean you
Right.
that's possible. Anything can be destroyed.
Right. It's not a guarantee of success just because you paid money. That's
right.
Number one. And just because it doesn't cost a lot doesn't mean that it's not adequate.
Right.
Either.
Well, adequate for the task for which you intend. I mean, I would not feel inadequate with an HD Mora Companion carbon, right?
I would be grateful.
I'd be grateful to have
that I
knife.
had it, right?
But there are people that their skill level is so high they can get a truck stop knife and run the wheels off of it.
Yeah, or a fold out razor blade knife.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
But they don't ask.
It's better than anything we can make or fabricate from the quartz that we have available right now.
Absolutely. There will never be a sharp piece of rock that will outperform an edge steel cutting tool. Just not happening.
But they do eye surgery with obsidian, Mike.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But you're not going to be, batoning
no
obsidian.
No.
Right.
And yes, you can field dress a deer with a sharp rock. It
Yes.
can be done.
Yeah.
But
how much fun is it though?
right. And there again, survival has always been a game of calories. Right. So
not just gaining them, replacing them and acquiring them.
Calories
and
in,
expending
calories
them.
out. Yeah. And I've seen whether it was in my civilian job or anything like that, the person that was successful was the one that could go the longest without resupply,
Right.
without the next job, without that kind of thing. And so, anyway,
Brain fart.
brain fart. I don't know where I was going with that.
I think another thing too, though, is people are always like doing these extremes, right? Like I mentioned, the "I'm never coming home" bag, an inch bag, right? And so they say, okay, if I could only have one axe for the rest of my life, I have to have a Gransfors Brooks, or a Holtz, or a Wetterlings, or whatever it is, whatever your favorite one is. I'm a council tool guy, but whatever. You have to, so this one tool has to last for the rest of your life, and then you have to pass it on to the successive generation, right? And they have to pass it on to their children.
Yeah.
You know, I think people like try to look at it like that sometimes when we're talking to people.
Heirloom tools.
Heirloom style tools, is a thing. Where you were discussing like what is the job, right? Because a lot of people, we're trying to prepare them for disasters. We've had a lot of disasters currently. Helene just came through. Now they got the LA fires. Right. There's always something going on, whether it's an earthquake or a tornado or a hurricane, a fire, whatever it is. So we're always trying to prepare people for those kind of scenarios. But I think people take it a step further, like it's the zombie apocalypse.
This is the only one you're ever going to get.
Right.
And I think a lot of that is born out of poverty mentality. So, this is the only one you're ever going to get. You don't take your good stuff to the woods. You take your junk to the woods and go out and play with your junk. You leave your good clothes, your school clothes at home, and stuff like that.
I'm going to church.
I'm going, and you save your good shoes for when you got to go to church and stuff. And the thing of it is, it's not necessarily going to be that way. Once you get into that situation, you're in a constant state of resupply. You're the moment you step off trail, you are in a position of your resources are finite, the time is finite, and so you're going to have to. The clock is ticking. You're going to have to start looking for the next one, the consumables and stuff like that.
That's another thing too. Like because once you have gone through that supply, are you adequately prepared to forage? Are you prepared to hunt? Are you prepared to fish? Where's the redundancy in that? So are you adequately not just prepared with having the items, but are you adequately trained to use those items as well? And what happens when you fail?
Are you adequately motivated to get yourself out of a bad situation so that you don't have to do that stuff? But
do you have anything else to add into the adequacy talk? Because this is something that we've talked about a lot. I don't know. I'm thinking about all kind of stuff we talked about, like with water, for example. I think a lot of people in our industry, especially instructors, are trying to say this is the holy grail of water. This is your one tool option, and we don't teach that at all. Sure, grails are awesome, for example, but I don't think that covers every single problem out there. Like I still want a stainless steel container with me. I still want multiple ways to do it, whether I have to use a shamog or a bandana, or I have a pre-filter, or there's lots of ways that we can shuck and jive in the field if we had to, right? Because we want to rely on this tool, but what happens when you forget it?
Well, and it comes
someone
back,
steals it, it breaks.
That one is instant water right now. Doesn't require anything from me other than to press the thing down, right? So, but I've got to have a backup for that, because if something happens, the filter clogs, or you are relieved of it, something like that.
Yeah, it's all tannish water like we're dealing with right here.
And so I've got to have some kind of redundancy to that. And you can build in a buffer of adequacy through redundancy. That is a thing, right? I just want people to not gamble on something and find out the hard way that it wasn't adequate. I mean, we've all had nights shivering on the ground, laying on this side, minimize ground contact, till you get to freezing, you're shaking, and then you roll over on the other side. And you wake up
so annoying
in the morning and everything, and it was a rough night. So just if you look at your gear and you say, if I lost 30% of the capability of this item, would it still satisfy my core needs? Because those are all the same regardless of who we are. And so so let's say it takes, 10 seconds to press this. If it took 30 seconds, which that would be 3 times the amount of time, but if it took 30 seconds, would that still be, adequate? So try to build that in. So like if you have a tarp, we go with a 3x3 tarp. If I lost half that tarp, I'm still good.
Right.
And so you can build in that buffer of adequacy that way.
Through planning.
Right. Yeah.
I like that a lot.
But I would try to caution people to stay away from multifunctional items.
Relying on it for that multiple purposes.
Right. I really prefer dedicated items.
Dedicated gear.
It's like a multi-tool does a lot of stuff, but it doesn't do any of them exceptionally
well.
Right. And so if I'm relying on my poncho to be both shelter and rain gear or
water collection,
it can only be one of those at any given time.
It's my transport for the injured person.
And every time I use it for one of those, it becomes less efficient at the
lost.
Others. Right.
Right.
If I've got it tied up in a tree for water collection, then it's not my shelter.
Right.
Right. So I would just caution people against multifunctionality is great, but really we need to be the multi-tool.
Absolutely, yes, 100%. I'm glad you said that because that's one of my favorite sayings that you have.
Okay.
Be the multi-tool.
Be the multi-tool,
Right.
And because we know that your ingenuity is the best tool that you can have.
Right.
Right. That's what makes the difference. And so if I have an item and I can figure out something to do with it, then I'm making it multifunctional, not building the multifunctionality in the item.
Right. There is one more thing that I want to talk about, and that is the minimalistic approach versus, super prepared guy.
Right.
Right. We've all seen the joke of the guy that has the largest backpack in the world
Right.
on his back and he can't carry it and he falls over. And then we've also seen, let's just say primitive expert. I'm not even going to say minimalistic, but they've got
They got a shemagh and a water bottle.
They've got the training. They know how to make everything, and it could be as simple as making steaks or something like that.
Right.
Because I don't think that is adequate. Right. If you go out with just this minimal kit, like you said, it requires your time. It requires the calories. It requires the skill, the knowledge, the availability of resources, etc. Like when I was in search and rescue, I didn't have time to make steaks for my shelter when somebody's in a diabetic coma.
Right.
I have to set up a plow point and I have to work on them. And that means I have to do my shelter in under a minute.
And while you're working on them, you don't have time to fix your own food.
Exactly.
Like you have to wrap it, choke half of it down.
Which I'm always talking about being tactically efficient.
Right.
So that was like kind of the thing that I wanted to end on because I don't agree with this. I'm just going to run out and MacGyver this thing.
Right.
Because I'm so good at this.
Yeah. No, I think people set themselves up for failure. Now, if you are a highly skilled and you've been doing this since you were knee high to the grasshopper,
and you're in your backyard,
you're in
your area.
Well, and a lot of it's going to be climate dependent too.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're in the Southwest United States and it's that time of year where things are fairly temperate, you don't have a whole lot of negative degree temperatures coming in, that kind of stuff. Yeah, you can run that gambit, or you can run that gamble, and everything. But the people that live that way migrated.
Right, they grew
They
up with
did
it.
not. They didn't stay in the same place all of the time.
Right, they had to move with the game. They had to move with the temperature. They had to move with the resources.
They were constantly in a state of resupply.
Yeah.
Because they weren't carrying any of that stuff with them. They were getting fresh meat off the hook. They might smoke some of it or whatever, but for the most part.
I'm saying, why struggle when you don't have to? I mean,
Yeah.
you should set yourself up for the best probable chance of success at the very beginning. That's all I'm saying.
It's hard enough as it is, and so there's no need to make it any more difficult on yourself than it has to be. We're looking for the best possible outcome, which is you coming through the event none the worse for the wearer. Now, anybody can suffer, and being able to endure is a skill.
Yeah,
How much
definitely.
can you take, right?
100%, yeah.
But it doesn't have to be that way, and that doesn't have to be the metric by which you measure success. Like for me, I would like to be in the worst possible situation and come through it out the end. They're like, you don't even look like you've been through
It wasn't even that big of a
It
deal.
wasn't even that big of a deal.
It's just another story by the campfire.
Another story,
Yeah.
And so that's that would be my goal, you know.
Well, there you have it, folks. Get in the comments section. Let us know what you think about what we just said. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and until next time, y'all, keep fueling those fires.